Welcome to the Growing People podcast, where we take a 360-degree look at how people and organizations grow and develop. I'm coming to you from the road, and when I'm driving, I like to listen to podcasts, and just sometimes it's just for entertainment, but every once in a while something strikes me and I've got to pull over and take a couple of notes. So I was listening to an interview with a swimming coach, somebody who dedicated his life to changing the way people learned how to swim and how to perform at a high level in swimming. And what he said reminded me of my days as an athletics coach. I spent some time coaching football and wrestling. And one of the things I noticed, and the swim coach that said the same thing, is that when you are practicing or developing, you really want to focus on your weaknesses. You want to overcome those and constantly be working on better and better and better form. And part of that is noticing where you're falling short and then working on it. And coaches talk about that a lot. So in practices, you look at game films, find out where mistakes were made, and you work on correcting those mistakes, whether it's in execution or it's form, technique. You work on those things. Now, as a executive coach, I'm a firm believer in strengths and the strengths theory and looking at figuring out what you do really well and leveraging those strengths. But for the first time, I started thinking about the difference between performance and development. So as a coach, a football coach, you practice it on correcting the mistakes and overcoming the weaknesses, but you game plan based on your team's strengths. You practice to overcome the weaknesses and the shortcomings, but you game plan and you perform in the game based on your strengths. And it struck me, how does that fit as I'm working with people in organizations to perform but also develop? It's interesting because strength-based approaches are all about performance. How can you leverage what you're already good at to get further and further and further in performance? When I step back and I start asking about, well, how do you want to grow? That's when we can start looking at the things that are getting in the way of your ultimate performance, which tend to be the things that are holding you back or your weaknesses or mistakes. This got me thinking a little bit more about some analogies that we've used in the past when we're working, and this was from an emotional intelligence workshop that I lead. When people ask, what should I focus on? Well, it all depends. There's some things, if there's strengths, you're consistently doing it at a high level already. So developing those, you want to leverage those in your performance, but perhaps you can start to look at the things in your own personal development that are getting in the way. So we would use an analogy of headwind and tailwind. And you take a look at, you got to address both. If you're traveling across country, you want to consider the obstacles or headwinds that are going to be holding you back. But you've also got to want to kind of catch into that jet stream that's going to propel you across the country. As the swimming coach was talking, he was all about efficiency and started to look at, you might have a current that you're swimming into or that you latch onto and is pulling you forward, but you also want to look at your own vessel, your body, and how you're oriented in the water. Is it creating drag? Also, the propulsion that you're using, arms and legs. He was all about using arms and legs together. But performance, you want to look at propulsion. What's going to move you forward? In developing technique, you want to take a look at whether or not you're creating drag. This is for swimming. And I would say that translates really well into development and performance in work or in personal skills. When you are performing, nobody likes to focus on the things that you're bad at. So you want to leverage the things that you're good at. When you're asking yourself how to develop, you want to focus on the things that are creating drag, that are keeping you from propelling yourself at the highest level. So it sets up kind of a really interesting metaphor to think about when you're performing or when you're developing. So you want to look at external factors. In performance, you do everything that you can to get into that tailwind that's going to propel you forward. In development, you want to know specifically what's in the way. What are the headwinds and obstacles that are going to keep you going? That's part of the planning and practice piece. So those are external factors. Performance, get into that tailwind and have it propel you forward. Development, understand the headwinds that are going to hold you back. Now, what about internal factors? Drag and propulsion. When you're performing, you want to focus on the propulsion. You want to focus on whatever it's going to take to move you forward. But when you're developing, you really want to correct the drag. The things that are keeping you, the internal things that are keeping you from moving forward. So as I was listening to this swim coach talk about how is it that you get people to perform at a high level. Old school coaching, it was just about, kicking in laps. He was all about technique and making sure that you are efficiently moving through the water. That's what coaches do at practice. So that you can perform when you're in the meet. When you're working on yourself, on your own personal and professional development, performance is all about focusing on your strengths, focusing on the propulsion that's going to move you forward and getting into that tailwind, getting it done as best you can in performance. But when you step into a development mindset, it's okay to look at the weaknesses or the drag points that are holding you back and understand better the headwinds that you face and the obstacles that you have to overcome.